Welcome to West Film. We bring you the best movie recaps, reviews, ending explained videos, and hidden details from your favorite films. If you love great movies, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Now grab some popcorn, and let's jump into today's movie. John Cale asks Carol Finity if she can help arrange an interview with the Secret Service for a position on the President's detail. Jenna agrees to help. Cale also asks if she can get White House tour passes for his daughter Emily, since Emily is deeply into politics and practically idolizes President Sawyer. Jenna tells him that shouldn't be difficult. Elsewhere in the White House, a red-haired man named Conrad Cerny quietly enters room 116 without drawing attention. He's dressed as if he belongs there, posing as one of the workers, and no one realizes anything is wrong. Later, John goes to pick Emily up from her mother's house. Emily is clearly upset with him and refuses to speak to him properly. Her mother, Melanie, reminds him that he missed Emily's talent show the week before because of his demanding job. It's obvious John has disappointed his daughter many times before, and her cold attitude comes from that history of pain. But the moment he hands her the White House passes, her mood changes completely. All the anger vanishes, replaced by sheer excitement. Back at the White House, Sawyer notices a reporter named Roger Skinner loudly criticizing his policies outside. Anne then tells him his wife, Allison, is on the phone. She speaks to him with warmth and confidence, reminding him that she believes in him, and tells him to keep the pocket watch she gave him close. Sawyer assures her it's in his front pocket, right next to his heart. Meanwhile, Conrad A, still disguised as a janitor, climbs into a truck carrying a box. No one realizes the box is hiding a powerful bomb. John and Emily arrive at the White House, pass through security, and meet Finity. John and Finity recognize each other from college, giving their reunion an awkward but familiar energy. Soon after, Cale sits down for his interview with Finity and Special Agent Ryan Todd. During the interview, his background comes up. He served in Afghanistan and even saved a general's nephew, proving he's far from inexperienced, but his record also works against him. His credit score is poor, his college grades were average, and his history shows trouble with authority. Because of this, Finity sees him as too big a risk and unqualified for the Secret Service. John tries to convince her that real-world experience matters more than numbers on a file, but she won't budge, and turns him down. Afterward, Emily eagerly asks her father whether he got the job. Not wanting to crush her excitement, they all lose the chance to be the hero she wants him to be. John lies and tells her what she wants to hear, letting her believe he'll be serving the president. Elsewhere in the White House, Walker joins a meeting with the rest of the president's protective detail. Since it's his last day, the agents surprise him with a cake decorated with sparklers, and he looks genuinely touched. John and Emily join the official White House tour. As they move through the building, John notices a group of men who seem slightly suspicious, though they're dressed as home theater repairmen and appear to be there for legitimate work. He doesn't stop to investigate and keeps moving with the group. Their guide, Donnie Donaldson, leads them through the building, quickly becoming impressed by Emily's knowledge of White House history and security trivia. She even points out the location of the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, explaining she researched it online, and her level of detail surprises him. The tour is suddenly interrupted when President Sawyer himself appears and greets the visitors. Emily is starstruck, gushing like a true fan, and asks him a question for her YouTube channel before proudly introducing her father as someone who'll be working on the president's security detail. Sawyer immediately realizes John has lied to his daughter about the job, but he doesn't let the moment turn awkward. After Sawyer leaves, Emily heads to the bathroom. While she's gone, John and Donnie talk about the War of 1812, when the White House was burned. At the same time, Conrad enters the Capitol building carrying a mop and bucket, leaving it in the middle of a room as if it's nothing more than cleaning equipment. Just as the timer on his watch hits 0, the hidden bomb detonates inside the building. As Finity drives away from the area, she sees a massive explosion tear through the Capitol. The blast sends chaos across Washington, and everyone on site scrambles into emergency mode. Staff and personnel are quickly evacuated, but the White House tour group is ordered to stay put, leaving the visitors trapped and confused while the situation outside spirals further out of control. That's when the repair workers John noticed earlier reveal who they really are: heavily armed mercenaries who've been hiding in plain sight. Without wasting a second, they attach silencers to their weapons and begin storming through the White House, taking down every agent they come across. The group is led by Emil Stenz, a ruthless operator who knows exactly where he wants to go first at the armory. Once inside, the attackers grab heavier weapons and gear, loading up for the next phase of the assault. As they head toward an elevator, Emily manages to hide before they spot her. While the White House burns and panic spreads, Walker takes command outside, ordering a perimeter formed and telling staff to evacuate. Then the real assault begins. Stenz's hit squad moves with terrifying precision, clearly working from a well-organized plan. They take the rooftop and start eliminating the guards positioned around the perimeter with brutal, accurate fire, and in moments the White House's security response starts falling apart. Inside, John Cale is losing his mind. He knows Emily is somewhere in the building, but he's stuck with the tour group and can't just run off without drawing attention. Every passing second makes him more desperate. Meanwhile, Emily is forced to watch White House security forces get wiped out right in front of her. She somehow avoids being captured at first, staying hidden while two of the mercenaries open the gates and let several vans drive straight onto the grounds. Emily records the entire thing on her camera, capturing proof of the attack as it unfolds. From here, things get far more dangerous. The mercenaries strip off their disguises, and we're introduced to more of the attackers, including Tyler and Killick. Killick quickly proves himself one of the most dangerous men in the group, cutting through agents and helping seize control of the building. Soon, the tour guests are rounded up and taken hostage. John manages to grab a gun and tries to break away as the mercenaries spot him and open fire, but he moves fast, dodging their shots and slipping out of reach. Outside, helicopters approach the White House trying to respond, but the mercenaries fire heavy artillery at them, forcing the choppers to pull back. Walker tells the president they have only one option now: reach the secure bunker immediately, or risk being killed if they stay exposed. Back inside, John reaches the bathroom and realizes Emily isn't there. Before he can process it, a mercenary attacks him. John tricks the man, fights back, kills him, and takes his radio so he can listen in on the attackers' communications. Moments later, he spots the president's security detail moving through the hallway. Sawyer is being escorted toward the safe room while the vice president is taken aboard Air Force One, which immediately takes off for safety. At first, Walker appears to be doing his duty, leading Sawyer and the presidential detail toward the POC, the Underground Emergency Operations Center. But then, without warning, he turns on them in a shocking betrayal. He kills the agents protecting Sawyer, revealing he's no ally at all. John overhears Walker speaking with Stenz through the attacker's video feed and manages to track their location. When he sees Sawyer in danger, he opens fire, giving the president a chance to run. During the escape, Sawyer strikes Stenz, and John takes down a mercenary named Bobby. With no time to think, John and Sawyer sprint through the corridors as the attackers give chase, eventually finding themselves trapped and jumping into an elevator. The mercenaries try to intercept them on a lower level, but the two slip away just in time. Moments later, Stenz and Walker step into the very same elevator, unaware that the president and John are hiding right above them. Inside, Stenz angrily confronts Walker, clearly frustrated with how things are going. Afterward, the two head off to find Tyler, the hacker, and order him to begin his part of the mission. They also force the remaining White House staff and secretaries into the Blue Room with the other hostages. Outside, Finity brings Speaker Effelson to a command center, where they meet General Caulfield. From there, they contact Vice President Hammond aboard Air Force One and brief him on the disaster unfolding at the White House. Meanwhile, still perched above the elevator, John tells Sawyer they should call in SEAL Team 6 and end this. Sawyer explains there's a satellite phone in the presidential residence, but reaching it means climbing several floors higher. News crews and military forces begin gathering outside, turning the attack into a national crisis playing out in real time. Inside the POC, Tyler struts in like he owns the place, popping a lollipop in his mouth before plugging his equipment into the government's systems as the hacking operation officially begins. The hostages are moved into another room and soon joined by the remaining secretaries and staff. Emily, still trying to stay brave, keeps recording footage of the mercenaries and uploads it to her channel. At the same time, her mother sends her a text, and the notification sound gives away her hiding spot. Killick hears it and moves toward the closet where she's hiding, threatening to shoot if she doesn't come out. Emily waits just long enough for the upload to finish, making sure the footage gets out to the world, and only then surrenders. Killick grabs her and drags her to the rest of their hostages. Back near the elevator, John spots a mercenary moving through the building with javelin missiles. He and Sawyer are almost discovered, but another attacker dismisses the concern and tells his partner to stop being paranoid, a small mistake that keeps them hidden a little longer. The scene shifts to Air Force One, where Vice President Hammond is speaking with General Caulfield and Finity. She explains that the Constitution places serious limits on how the military can respond, meaning U.S. troops can't simply storm the White House without proper authority. Then comes the call that changes everything. Walker contacts them, and everyone is stunned to learn he's behind the entire attack. He demands a $400 million ransom from the Federal Reserve, and when asked about the president's safety, lies and claims Sawyer is in his custody. He threatens to execute the president on the South Lawn unless he gets his plane and the money within 2 hours. While the government tries to process the impossible betrayal, John and Sawyer continue moving toward the presidential residence. They finally reach the satellite phone and manage to contact the crisis team outside. John quickly briefs them on the attackers, the hostages, and the president's condition. Finity tells him their best chance is to reach the hidden tunnels beneath the White House. Right as John and Sawyer try to move, Cale notices a couple of mercenaries nearby and pulls the president into hiding. His ammo is running low, so he can't afford to waste a single shot. He takes down the first attacker, but the second rushes him, forcing a brutal close-range fight that spills into the kitchen, where the two men smash through everything in their path. The fight only ends when Sawyer grabs an automatic weapon and steps in himself to save John. After surviving yet another close call, Cale contacts Finity again and tells her he's just saved the president's life once more. She tells him to turn on the news, and when he does, his heart nearly stops. Emily's footage, secretly uploaded from inside the White House, has gone viral and is now airing on national television. The world can finally see the attackers clearly, but for John it's terrifying. His daughter has just exposed herself to the terrorists. While John panics, Melanie sees the news too and rushes toward the White House, desperate to reach Emily. Unfortunately, Stenz and his men also see the video and head straight for the hostages. He finds Emily, snatches the phone from her hand, and slaps her across the face, coldly warning her she won't make it through the day. Thanks to Emily's video, though, the Pentagon can start identifying the attackers. Killick is described as a born sociopath. Tyler is revealed to be one of the best hackers in the world, a former NSA employee who was fired. General Caulfield explains who Stenz really is. Once connected to a paramilitary group, his operation was shut down when the Sawyer administration came to power, a decision that eventually led to him spending 2 years in a foreign prison. It gave him every reason to hate Sawyer. Meanwhile, Cale and Sawyer finally reach the underground tunnels. For a moment it seems like they've found a way out, but Stens' team has hidden cameras throughout the area and quickly locates the president. Worse, the tunnel gate has been wired with explosives. Within seconds John and Sawyer are under heavy fire and forced to retreat, barely escaping the ambush and making it to the presidential limousine. Stens fires at them at first, then decides to chase them in another vehicle instead. As John tries to drive toward the west gate, Sawyer warns him the gate is built from extremely strong metal and the limo will never break through. With no clean exit available, John swerves away and starts circling the lawn and the fountain, trying to outmaneuver the pursuing mercenaries. They keep hammering the limo with gunfire, but John uses sharp driving to take out one of their vehicles. A US tank arrives, seemingly giving them a chance, but it's destroyed by an RPG before it can help, and the same weapon is then aimed at the limo. Sawyer searches the car and finds an RPG of his own. In a wild, unbelievable move, he climbs partway out the window and fires it at the gate, blowing it wide open. At the entire moment caught by news cameras, with reporters barely able to believe what they're seeing. But just as John focuses on escaping, Killick drags Emily to a window and threatens to kill her. Seeing his daughter in danger shakes John for one critical second, and he loses concentration. That's all it takes. A rocket slams into the limo, sending it crashing into a nearby pool. Stens and Walker arrive to retrieve Sawyer and John, but Cale manages a distraction, buying just enough time to throw a grenade and escape with the president. One of the mercenaries tries to finish them off with a minigun while they take cover in a pool house, but his gunfire hits a boiler, triggering a massive explosion caught live on camera. The media assumes President Sawyer has been killed in the blast. With the country thrown into panic, Vice President Hammond is quickly sworn in as the new president. Meanwhile, Finity discovers that Walker has an inoperable brain tumor about the size of a golf ball. He's already living under a death sentence. Hoping she can still stop him, she brings in his wife, Muriel. Muriel tries to talk him down, but Walker insists everything he's doing is for their dead son, Kevin. When Muriel remembers the injustice surrounding Kevin's death, she stops fighting him and lets her husband continue his revenge. Back inside the White House, John gets Sawyer somewhere safer to treat the wounds from the explosion. While they catch their breath, the two talk about their lives and their daughters. John tells Sawyer that Emily is a huge admirer of his and truly believes in him. At the Pentagon, alarms suddenly blare as Hammond orders a Special Forces unit to storm the White House and retake it. John urgently contacts Finity to warn them, but General Caulfield says she's been relieved of duty. As Black Hawk helicopters race toward the building, John warns them the mercenaries have Javelin missiles and tells them to abort, but he's ignored. The first Black Hawk is shot down almost immediately. The remaining two tried to eliminate the mercenaries on the roof, but a second is also destroyed. As the third comes under threat, John reaches the roof and manages to save it, coming face to face with Stens. Special Forces soldiers try to intervene, but Stens fires on their helicopter and brings it down. The wreckage crashes dangerously close to the hostages, missing them by only a small distance. John and Stens continue their vicious fight across the roof, eventually crashing through a glass ceiling. John finally gains the upper hand, but just as he's about to finish Stens, another mercenary appears and forces him to retreat. In the chaos, John loses his White House tour pass as a small mistake that reveals the truth to the attackers. Emily is his daughter. Meanwhile, Tyler finishes his upload and breaks through the last firewall protecting the system. With that barrier gone, he gains access to NORAD's weapons network and uses it to launch a missile with terrifying accuracy. It locks onto Air Force One and strikes it in midair, sending the plane down and killing everyone aboard, including newly sworn-in President Hammond. With Hammond dead, Speaker Raffleson is immediately sworn in and receives the nuclear codes. His first decision is ruthless. He orders an airstrike on the White House to wipe out the terrorists once and for all, scheduled for just 10 minutes later. Inside, Walker writes down a set of codes while Stenz brings Emily into the Oval Office. Now that they know she's John Cale's daughter, the mercenaries use her as leverage, demanding over the intercom that Cale bring them President Sawyer or Emily gets hurt. Hearing this, Sawyer decides he should surrender to protect her. Cale contacts Finity and learns there are only about 8 minutes left before the airstrike hits. Time is running out fast. Walker reveals the nuclear football to Sawyer. With it, they could launch nuclear strikes on several cities across the Middle East. Walker believes he's saving other soldiers' sons from dying the way his did. But Sawyer refuses to activate it, even with Emily's life on the line, and she understands the weight of that choice even while standing in danger herself. Outside the Oval Office, Cale notices the famous painting of the White House burning and gets an idea. He starts a fire downstairs, hoping to trigger the sprinklers and create enough chaos to interrupt Walker. Just before Walker can harm Emily, the alarms go off and the sprinklers activate, forcing him to stop. Cale uses the confusion to take down 2 armed men. But then Killick corners him. Just as it looks like Cale is trapped, Donnie the tour guide unexpectedly saves him with a fatal blow to Killick. Cale tells Donnie to get the hostages out of the building as fast as possible. Elsewhere, Tyler tries to escape through one of the tunnels, but his own trap turns against him. He accidentally triggers one of his own bombs and kills himself. Back in the Oval Office, Walker and another mercenary argue, since destroying half the world was never supposed to be part of the plan. Walker no longer cares and kills him without hesitation. Sawyer makes one desperate attempt to fight back, stabbing Walker with a pen, but it isn't enough. Walker overpowers him and forces him to open and activate the nuclear football. Across every launch site, missiles are armed and prepared to fire. At the same time, Stenz attacks Cale, throwing him around with brutal force while the hostages escape the White House. In the Oval Office, Walker shoots Sawyer directly in the chest. Seeing this, Emily furiously tries to attack Walker herself, but he easily shoves her aside. Cale and Stenz continue their vicious fight, and after a hard struggle, Cale finally wraps a grenade belt around Stenz's neck, pulls the pins, and leaves him trapped with no way out. Moments later, Stenz is blown apart. With only 2 minutes left before the airstrike, Walker begins entering the target codes for multiple locations. But before he can finish, Cale crashes into the Oval Office in a van with only seconds to spare. He grabs a minigun and opens fire on Walker, stopping him just as the launch sequence times out. Cale tells Emily to run while he searches for Sawyer. Emily grabs the presidential flag and heads out onto the lawn. Fighter jets are already approaching, ready to carry out the strike. Even though Raffleson doesn't cancel the order, the pilots refuse to continue once they see Emily waving the flag, and because of her, the airstrike is stopped at the last possible moment. Outside, the crowd erupts in cheers, and the media instantly starts calling Emily a hero. Back inside, Cale discovers Sawyer is still alive as the bullet hit the pocket watch his wife gave him, the one he kept in his front pocket, close to his heart. That watch saved his life. Finity contacts Cale and tells him the crisis may not be fully over. She suspects the mercenaries weren't truly hired by Walker or Stenz. Cale already has a strong idea of who was really behind it. Outside, Cale reunites with Melanie and Emily. Finity and Raffleson arrive at the White House to meet him. Cale lies and tells them Sawyer is dead, watching closely to see how Raffleson reacts. Raffleson quickly suggests sending troops back into the Middle East to guard against retaliation, even though that would destroy the peace treaty Sawyer had been trying to secure. That's when Cale reveals he knows Raffleson was involved in the attack from the start. To prove it, he has Finity dial the callback number from the pager used to send Walker the updated codes. The truth becomes impossible to hide. Sawyer then steps out alive and orders Raffleson arrested, calling the entire attack exactly what it was, a coup d'apostrophe tilde copyright tat. He admits he was wrong about Kale and apologizes for not giving him the Secret Service position earlier. Sawyer boards his helicopter and officially addresses him as Special Agent Kale, inviting Emily to come along for the ride. As they prepare to leave, Finity informs Sawyer that the leaders of Russia, China, Iran, and France have all agreed to the peace treaty. With the crisis finally over and the mission saved, Sawyer tells his pilot to do the thing. The helicopter rises above Washington as Kale and Emily sit back together, taking in the view from the sky. White House Down starts with a setup that feels almost proudly ridiculous, but in a very familiar action movie way. We meet John Cal, played by Channing Tatum, a Capitol police officer who isn't exactly winning at life. When the story begins, he's divorced. His relationship with his daughter Emily is shaky, and he's trying to land a job with the Secret Service. Not because he's some polished, perfect candidate, either. His interview with Special Agent Carol Finity goes badly enough that you can almost feel the movie quietly saying, yeah, this guy is absolutely not getting hired. But Cal has another reason for being at the White House that day. He's brought Emily along for a tour, hoping it might help him score a few points as a father. To be fair, it makes sense. Emily is obsessed with politics, the White House, the president, all of it. For her, this isn't just some boring government building tour, it's basically her version of a theme park. And then, because this is that kind of movie, the worst possible thing happens on the exact day Cal happens to be inside. The White House is attacked. President James Sawyer, played by Jamie Foxx, suddenly goes from leader of the free world to a guy who needs to be hidden, protected, moved, and basically dragged through an action movie. Cal, the man who was just rejected for the job of protecting the president, now becomes the only person in the right place at the right time to actually do it. That's the whole engine of White House Down, a rejected Secret Service hopeful, his daughter trapped somewhere in the chaos, the president under threat, the White House turned into a war zone. It's not subtle, it's not realistic, it's not even trying that hard to convince you this could happen in real life. But as the setup for a loud, over-the-top summer action movie, it gets the job done. The film basically asks you to accept one massive coincidence after another. Cal just happens to be there. His daughter just happens to be inside. The president just happens to need him. The attack just happens to unfold at the exact moment a failed interview can turn into a heroic redemption story. Whether that works for you depends entirely on how much patience you have for big blockbuster logic. Because this isn't a movie built on realism, it's built on momentum. It wants to throw Cal into the White House, trap him there, give him personal stakes through Emily, national stakes through Sawyer, and then let the whole thing explode outward from there. In that sense, the premise is very simple, maybe too simple, but it's also the kind of premise action movies have survived on for decades. One ordinary but capable guy stuck in an impossible situation, forced to become the hero nobody expected him to be. The only difference here is that the office building is now the White House, the hostage is the president, and the family drama is standing right in the middle of the gunfire. At the center of all the explosions and White House chaos, the movie tries to give John Cal a more personal reason to care, not just save the president, save the country, but save his daughter, and maybe prove to her that he isn't the disappointment she thinks he is. That matters, because when we first meet Cal and Emily, their relationship isn't exactly warm and easy. There's distance there. Emily doesn't look at him like a hero, she looks at him like a dad who's let her down one too many times. And Cal knows it. You can see he's trying, but he's also kind of clumsy about it. He wants to reconnect with her but doesn't really know how to do that without turning it into some big gesture. So he brings her to the White House, and honestly, that part of the setup is one of the smarter emotional hooks in the movie. Emily isn't just randomly dragged into the story, she actually cares about this place. She knows politics, she admires the president, and she's excited to be there in a way that feels very specific to her character. For Cal, the tour is a chance to win back some respect for Emily. It's a chance to be inside the world she's fascinated by, of course, because this is White House Down, The father-daughter bonding trip turns into a hostage nightmare almost immediately. The movie uses Emily's danger to push Cal forward. Once the attack begins, he's not just fighting because he wants to be heroic, he's fighting because his daughter is somewhere inside this collapsing situation, surrounded by armed men, panic, and political madness. That gives the action a personal pulse, even when the larger plot gets completely absurd. Now, does the daughter subplot always work? Not really. There are moments where Emily feels less like a real kid and more like a screenwriter's shortcut. She's smart, political, brave, conveniently placed, and sometimes just a little too involved in the plot. The movie wants her to be the emotional heart, the patriotic voice, and the innocent person in danger, all at once. That's a lot to put on one character, and there are scenes where it starts to feel forced, but the basic idea behind it is still clear. Cal isn't only trying to save the president, he's trying to become the father Emily needs him to be. Every time he pushes through another impossible situation, every time he refuses to give up, the movie is really asking whether this disaster can somehow become his second chance. It's corny, absolutely. The whole dad proves himself through a national crisis thing isn't exactly subtle storytelling. But in a big, loud action movie like this, that emotional simplicity kind of fits. You don't need a deeply complicated family drama when helicopters are crashing and the White House is being torn apart. You just need enough of a personal connection to make the hero's mission feel like more than a job. That's what Emily gives the film. She turns Cal's survival mission into something messier, more emotional, and more desperate. The country may be watching the president, but Cal's real audience is his daughter. He doesn't just want to save the day, he wants her to finally believe he can. White House Down is one of those movies where you learn pretty quickly that logic isn't driving the bus. Actually, logic might not even be in the vehicle. The film runs on pure blockbuster coincidence. Cal fails his Secret Service interview, walks into a White House tour with his daughter, and then suddenly becomes the only guy capable of protecting the president during a full-scale attack. It's ridiculous, but the movie knows the audience came for chaos, not a security briefing, so it just keeps moving and hopes you don't stop to ask too many questions. The problem is, sometimes you do stop, because there are moments where the movie stretches disbelief so far it almost snaps. Armed attackers move through the White House like they bought a ticket and downloaded the floor plan. Trained security forces are taken out way too easily. The president somehow survives situations where every bullet in the room seems allergic to hitting him. Cal keeps running, fighting, escaping, crashing, and shooting, and somehow still has enough energy to keep going. Like he's powered by action movie nonsense. And look, I'm not saying a movie like this needs to be realistic. Nobody walks into White House Down expecting a documentary about presidential security. Big action movies are allowed to cheat. They're allowed to exaggerate. They're allowed to have impossible timing, last-second escapes, and heroes who survive things that would send a normal person straight to the hospital. But there's a difference between fun exaggeration and scenes that make you lean back and think, come on. That happens a lot here. The plot is constantly bending itself to create the next explosion, the next chase, the next hostage moment, the next heroic entrance. It doesn't really build tension through believable danger, it builds tension by stacking absurd situations on top of each other and hoping the noise is enough to distract you. Sometimes, honestly, it works. The movie is fast enough and loud enough that you can just ride with it. There's a silly charm in how shamelessly over the top it becomes. It's the kind of film where the White House can turn into a war zone and nobody seems emotionally equipped to respond like an actual human being. They respond like characters who know they're trapped inside a summer blockbuster. But the stupidity does pile up after a while. The movie isn't asking you to suspend disbelief anymore. It's asking you to throw disbelief out the window, lock the door behind it, and never speak of it again. Depending on your mood, that can either be entertaining or exhausting. For me, The absurdity is part of the film's identity. White House Down isn't a smart thriller pretending to be dumb. It's a dumb thriller pretending it has just enough seriousness to matter. That's a very strange balance, and it doesn't always land. Still, there's something weirdly watchable about how committed it is. Every plot turn feels bigger, louder, and less believable than the last. But the movie never slows down long enough to apologize. It just blows something up and moves on. The easiest way to describe White House Down is also the most obvious one. It's Die Hard in the White House, and the movie isn't exactly hiding that. You have the regular guy hero who isn't supposed to be there. You have the important building taken over by armed criminals. You have the loved one trapped inside. You have the outside authorities trying to manage the situation from a distance. You have betrayals, secret motives, radio conversations, explosions, impossible escapes, and one man slowly becoming the biggest problem the villains didn't plan for. That structure is so familiar it almost feels like the movie came with the checklist already filled out. John Kelly's basically dropped into the John McClane position, only instead of an office tower, it's the most famous political building in America. Instead of saving his wife, he's trying to save his daughter. Instead of Alan Rickman in a suit, we get a more chaotic mix of paramilitary attackers, corrupt insiders, and political grudges. And instead of a Christmas party, we get a White House till it turns into a battlefield. The problem isn't that White House Down borrows from Die Hard. A lot of action movies do. At this point, Die Hard is less a single movie and more a blueprint Hollywood keeps repainting. Die Hard on a bus, Die Hard on a plane, Die Hard on a boat, Die Hard in a hockey arena. So Die Hard in the White House was almost inevitable. The problem is that White House Down doesn't always make the formula feel new. It knows the beats but rarely surprises you with them. You can feel the movie setting up the emotional stakes. You can feel a betrayal coming. You can feel when a character is being positioned for a later reveal. Even the one man against impossible odds angle plays out almost exactly the way you'd expect. And because the movie keeps reminding you of better action films, especially Die Hard, it creates a comparison that doesn't really help it out, because Die Hard worked not just because of the building or the hostage situation, but because the tension felt sharp, the villain felt controlled and dangerous, and the hero felt vulnerable, tired, irritated, and human. Every floor of that building felt like a new problem. Every injury mattered. Every mistake had weight. White House Down has the shape of that kind of movie, but not always the pressure. Cal gets bruised, sure. He runs around in a vest. He fights, shoots, hides, escapes, and improvises. But the film is so busy being big and loud that it rarely gives you that same feeling of a man barely surviving on instinct. It's more interested in spectacle than in squeeze, more interested in the next set piece than the anxiety of being trapped. Still, I do think there's a reason the formula keeps working even in recycled form. There's something naturally satisfying about watching one underestimated guy become the wrench thrown into a massive criminal operation. White House Down understands that simple pleasure. It gives Cal a building full of enemies, a daughter to protect, a president to drag through the madness, and a whole system that suddenly has to rely on the guy it rejected an hour earlier. That's old school action movie stuff, and when the film leans into it without trying to be too clever, it can be fun. Original, though? Not really. This isn't a movie that reinvents the genre. It's a movie that raids the genre's closet, tries on the classic outfit, adds a few explosions, throws in some jokes, and hopes the audience is in the mood for comfort food. And honestly, that's probably the fairest way to watch it, not as the next Die Hard, but more like a loud, slightly ridiculous cover version, performed by someone who knows the tune but not always the soul behind it. The strange thing about White House Down is that it never really escaped. The shadow of Olympus has fallen, and honestly, How could it? Both films came out in 2013. Both are about terrorists taking over the White House. Both have one action hero stuck inside trying to save the president while the entire American government falls into panic mode outside. It's one of those Hollywood coincidences where you can almost picture two studios looking at each other across the room like, wait, you're making that movie too? But even though the basic setup is nearly identical, the two films don't feel the same. Olympus Has Fallen takes itself more seriously. It's darker, harder, more violent, more aggressive. That movie wants you to feel the attack. It wants the White House takeover to feel brutal and nasty. Gerard Butler's hero is closer to the old-school action machine type, grim, efficient, angry, and built for survival. White House Down goes in a completely different direction. This one is lighter, sillier, more playful. It has more jokes, more buddy banter, more moments where the movie seems to wink at the audience instead of asking them to sit in total seriousness. Where Olympus wants intensity, White House Down wants popcorn. Where Olympus feels like a siege thriller, White House Down feels like an action comedy wearing a political thriller costume. And that difference is probably why people split so hard on them. If you want the White House attack premise to feel tense and dangerous, Olympus Has Fallen is probably the stronger version. It has more bite, the villains feel more threatening, the violence has more impact, and the whole thing is built around a clearer sense of danger. But if you want something more ridiculous, more colorful, more relaxed about its own stupidity, White House Down has its own appeal. It's the kind of movie where the president can end up in the middle of the action, throwing out lines, dodging bullets, and somehow turning a national crisis into a buddy adventure. The problem is, White House Down often suffers just because the comparison exists at all. On its own, you might see it as just another loud Roland Emmerich summer movie. Placed next to Olympus Has Fallen, its weaknesses become easy to spot. The action feels less forceful. The stakes feel softer. The humor sometimes undercuts the suspense. Channing Tatum, as likable as he can be, doesn't bring the same hard-edged action presence that Gerard Butler brings to his film. At the same time, I don't think it's completely fair to call White House Down just the worse version of the same idea. It's trying to do something slightly different, not necessarily smarter, not necessarily better depending on your taste, but different. Olympus Has Fallen is the serious version. White House Down is the summer blockbuster version where everyone seems aware the whole thing is absurd. That's why some viewers actually prefer it. It's easy to watch casually, it's less grim, and it has more personality in the president-hero dynamic. It gives you explosions and political chaos without asking you to treat every second like a national tragedy. For me, the comparison comes down to mood. Olympus Has Fallen is the one you watch when you want a tougher, more direct action thriller. White House Down is the one you watch when you want something bigger, dumber, and more openly entertaining. They're twin movies, sure, but one walks in with a clenched jaw, and the other walks in carrying a rocket launcher and a punchline. Roland Emmerich isn't exactly the director you call when you want quiet, delicate realism. You call him when you want landmarks damaged, cities panicking, governments collapsing, and expensive things exploding in slow, dramatic fashion. That's his comfort zone, and White House Down sits very comfortably inside it, even if it's not his biggest or most outrageous disaster movie. This time, instead of destroying the whole planet or leveling half a city, Emmerich narrows the chaos down to one very famous building. The White House becomes his playground. Hallways turn into battlegrounds. Rooms become hiding spots. The lawn becomes a car chase track. Helicopters, rockets, fire, smoke, shattered glass. The movie keeps finding ways to make the place feel less like a seat of government and more like a theme park attraction having a very bad day. That's both the fun and the problem. Emmerich knows how to stage scale. He knows how to make a blockbuster feel big. Even when the story is ridiculous, the film rarely feels small. There's always movement, always panic, always some new piece of destruction introduced before the last one has fully settled. He understands that this kind of movie needs forward motion, and for the most part, he keeps pushing it along. But he also hits almost every cliché tilde copyright you'd expect. The noble hero, the impossible rescue, the corrupt people in power, the ticking clock, the patriotic speeches, the last-second save, the huge national threat hanging over everything. It's all here, and Emmerich doesn't exactly handle it with a light touch. He goes big, then bigger, then somehow a little bigger again, even when a scene probably needed less noise and more tension. That's where White House Down starts to feel very much like an Emmerich film. It's not built around restraint, it's built around spectacle. Given a choice between a grounded moment and a ridiculous set piece, the movie will almost always choose the ridiculous set piece. Given a chance to turn political panic into visual chaos, it takes that chance immediately. And honestly, some of that works. There's a reason people still watch these kinds of movies. Emmerich has a specific talent for turning disaster into popcorn entertainment. He's not asking you to believe every detail, he's asking you to sit back and enjoy the machine, the explosions, the impossible timing, the heroes running through debris, the government officials yelling in control rooms, the world somehow depending on one guy who isn't even supposed to be there. The issue is that this approach can only carry the film so far. When the action is moving, White House Down has energy. When the destruction is front and center, it feels like the movie knows what it wants to be. But when it needs suspense, emotional weight, or smarter plotting, Emmerich's style doesn't always help. How the spectacle starts covering for weak writing instead of enhancing strong material. Still, I wouldn't call the direction lazy. It's very deliberate. How this is Emmerich doing what Emmerich does, taking a simple premise, inflating it with national stakes, and treating every hallway like it could become the center of a disaster sequence. Whether you enjoyed that depends on your tolerance for his style. If you want subtlety, this movie will drive you insane. But if you want polished, loud, proudly overblown destruction with just enough character banter to keep things moving, White House Down gives you exactly the version of Roland Emmerich you probably came for. Not his smartest work, not his most memorable either, but definitely his kind of chaos. If there's one thing White House Down absolutely refuses to be shy about, it's action. This movie doesn't tiptoe into chaos. Once the attack begins, it throws the White House into full blockbuster meltdown mode and keeps finding new ways to make things louder. Gunfire in the halls, explosions tearing through rooms, helicopters dropping in and out of the sky, rocket launchers, fires, secret tunnels, hand-to-hand fights. And yes, because subtlety left the building earlier, even a car chase on the White House lawn. That lawn chase is probably the scene that tells you exactly what movie you're watching. It's absurd, completely absurd, but it's also the sort of absurdity the film is clearly proud of. You're not supposed to sit there calculating whether this could happen. You're supposed to watch Channing Tatum and Jamie Foxx get thrown into the most ridiculous presidential escape scenario possible, and either laugh along with it or give up entirely. And honestly, some of the action does work. The movie has pace once it gets going. It understands that a premise this silly can't sit still for too long. Every few minutes, Callie's either running from someone, fighting someone, trying to find Emily, protecting Sawyer, dodging bullets, or stumbling into another part of the building where something expensive is about to be destroyed. That constant movement helps the film even when the story is weak. The action keeps it from feeling completely dead. It has that big budget summer energy where the movie is basically saying, look, maybe this doesn't make sense, but something's about to explode, so stay with me. The problem is repetition. After a while, the shootouts start blending together. The villains fire 1,000 rounds and hit almost nothing important. Cal survives so many close calls that danger starts to feel decorative. The White House keeps taking damage, but because the movie is so over the top from the beginning, the destruction loses impact instead of building tension. That's the tricky thing about action. More isn't always more. A good action scene needs shape. It needs escalation. It needs a sense that the characters are solving a problem, not just moving through noise. White House Down sometimes has that, especially when it pairs action with the Cal-Sawyer dynamic, but other times it just keeps throwing firepower at the screen and hoping volume can replace suspense. Still, I'd be lying if I said the action has no entertainment value. There's fun here, a dumb fun. Yes, but fun. The movie gives you the kind of set pieces designed for a packed summer audience: loud reactions, quick laughs, big crashes, ridiculous escapes. It's not elegant action. It's not gritty action. It's not the kind that makes you feel every punch and every bullet. It's popcorn action, and that can be enough, depending on what you came for. If you want realism, the film falls apart almost immediately. But if you want a 2-hour parade of gunfire, destruction, and impossible hero moments inside the most overprotected building in America, White House Down knows how to serve that meal. It may not always be thrilling. It may not always be smart, but it rarely forgets to blow something up. The humor in White House Down is either part of the fun or part of the problem, depending on how seriously you wanted this movie to take itself. Because on paper, this is a pretty serious situation. The White House has been invaded, people are being killed, the president is being hunted, and a child is trapped somewhere inside the chaos. There are military threats, political betrayal, nuclear stakes, and a whole country watching the government fall apart in real time. And then the movie keeps cracking jokes. That's the strange balance White House Down is trying to play. It wants the danger of a political siege thriller, but it also wants the loose energy of a buddy action comedy. Sometimes that combination gives the film its personality, other times it completely drains the tension out of the scene. The banter between John Cal and President Sawyer is clearly meant to be one of the big selling points. Channing Tatum plays Cal with that casual, slightly goofy action hero charm, while Jamie Foxx gives Sawyer a more relaxed, modern, sometimes almost too casual presidential energy. Put them together, and the movie becomes less about one man saving the president and more about two guys surviving the world's most dangerous workplace disaster. When the jokes land, the movie is easy to enjoy. There's something funny about the president being dragged through gunfire like he accidentally wandered into the wrong genre. There's something amusing about a national crisis turning into a buddy escape movie. The film knows this is ridiculous, and every now and then that self-awareness helps. It stops the movie from becoming too stiff or too fake serious. But the problem is that White House Down doesn't always know when to stop. Some of the one-liners feel forced. Some of the comic moments arrive right when the movie should probably be building suspense, and instead of making the danger feel sharper, the humor sometimes makes everything feel lighter than it should. You're watching a life or death situation, but the film keeps nudging you in the ribs like, pretty crazy, right? That can get tiring. The tour guide comedy is another example. It's clearly there to add a side dose of absurdity, but not every joke feels like it belongs. At times, the humor makes the movie feel less like a thriller with funny moments and more like an action comedy that forgot to fully admit what it was. And honestly, that may be the real identity of the film. White House Down was dressed up like a high-stakes political action thriller, but deep down it behaves like a loud, expensive action comedy. The violence is softened. The heroes keep joking. The president becomes part sidekick, part action partner. Even some of the villains get moments that feel broader and more cartoonish than genuinely threatening. For some viewers, that's exactly why the movie works. It doesn't sit there trying to be grim and brutal. It lets itself be silly. It plays with the genre. It turns the White House attack premise into something more playful and openly popcorn-friendly. For others, that same choice is what weakens the whole thing, because if the humor isn't funny enough and the danger isn't tense enough, the movie lands in a strange middle space, not sharp enough as comedy, not gripping enough as suspense, just noisy, busy, and constantly trying to charm its way past weak writing. Still, I get what the film is going for. It wants you to enjoy the ride, not question the tone. It wants the banter to make the explosions feel more entertaining. It wants Cal and Sawyer to feel like an unlikely action duo rather than just a bodyguard and a president. And when that chemistry clicks, White House Down has a fun, loose rhythm. When it doesn't, The jokes feel like they're standing in front of the suspense, waving for attention. Channing Tatum is an interesting choice for John Cal, because the movie needs him to be several things at once. He has to be believable as a guy with combat experience, someone who can take a beating, throw a punch, fire a weapon, and keep moving through a building full of armed attackers. But he also has to play the slightly messy father, the underdog job applicant, the rejected almost Secret Service guy, and the action hero who slowly earns everyone's trust. That's a lot for one character, especially in a movie that isn't exactly giving him deep dramatic material. Physically, Tatum fits the role well. He has the build, the movement, the action presence. When Cal is running through corridors, crashing through rooms, fighting off attackers, or getting dragged into another ridiculous set piece, Tatum looks comfortable enough. You buy that he can survive in this kind of movie universe, even if the situations themselves are completely insane. He also has that relaxed, likable quality that helps the film. Cal isn't written as some cold, perfect action machine. He's a little rough around the edges, he makes mistakes, he's trying to prove something. He's not the guy the system wanted, but he becomes the guy the situation needs. Tatum sells that everyday charm better than he sells heavy emotional drama. That's where the performance gets more mixed. When the movie asks him to be loose, funny, physical, and reactive, he does find he can throw out a dumb line, play off Jamie Foxx, and make Cal feel like a guy who's overwhelmed but still stubborn enough to keep going. In the lighter, action comedy moments, he fits the tone. But when the film asks for deeper intensity, it gets shakier. There are scenes where Cal is supposed to be terrified for Emily, furious at the villains, desperate, emotionally cracked open, and Tatum doesn't always reach the level the moment needs. Sometimes he looks a little too blank, a little too controlled, as if the movie is telling us he's devastated more than the performance is making us feel it. That's probably why the Bruce Willis comparison follows him around here, because White House Down is so openly built from the Die Hard mold. Cal naturally gets measured against John McClane, and that's not an easy comparison for anyone. Bruce Willis made McClane feel tired, annoyed, wounded, scared, funny, and heroic all at once. He didn't just win fights, he suffered through them. Tatum's Cal has the outline of that kind of hero, but not always the same texture. He's more polished, more physically superheroic, less emotionally scrappy. You can see the movie trying to present him as the modern version of that old-school action lead, but it doesn't fully land because Cal rarely feels as vulnerable as he should. He gets battered, sure, but the movie keeps treating him like the action figure version of a flawed man. Still, I don't think Tatum is bad in the role. He's not the strongest dramatic actor in the cast, and he doesn't carry the film with pure screen presence the way a classic action star might have. But he's watchable. He has enough charm to keep Cal from becoming boring and enough physical credibility to make the action scenes move. The issue is that White House Down sometimes needs a sharper spotlight than it gives him room to occupy. Cal is surrounded by spectacle, jokes, explosions, government panic, villain speeches, and presidential banter. Instead of becoming the undeniable center of the movie, he often feels like one part of a much bigger machine. That works for the ensemble energy, but it weakens him as the lone man against the world hero the story is clearly trying to build. So Tatum gets the job done, not perfectly, not memorably enough to redefine this kind of role, but well enough for the version of the movie he's in. He's not Bruce Willis. He's not Gerard Butler either. He's Channing Tatum in a vest, running through the White House, trying very hard to turn a failed interview into the most chaotic job audition imaginable. And honestly, for this movie, that's about right. Jamie Foxx's President Sawyer is one of the strangest pieces of White House Down, because he feels like he walked in from a slightly different movie, not always in a bad way, just noticeably. The film clearly wants Sawyer to be a modern, likable, cool president. He's not written as some stiff, distant commander-in-chief who only speaks in speeches and crisis room language. He jokes, he argues, he gets dragged into the action. He panics a little, he improvises. At times he feels less like the most protected man in the country and more like the unexpected second half of a buddy action duo, and depending on how you read the movie, that either gives it energy or completely breaks the illusion. Foxx is naturally charismatic, so there are moments where he makes the role more fun than it probably is on the page. When Sawyer is trading lines with John Cal, surviving ridiculous situations, or slowly becoming more involved in the fight, Foxx brings a looseness that keeps the movie from turning too heavy. He's not trying to play the president as untouchable, he plays him as a person thrown into a nightmare and trying to keep up. That part can be entertaining. The idea of a president who suddenly has to run, hide, shoot, and think on his feet inside his own collapsing house is a fun action movie hook. And Foxx understands the comedy in that. He gives Sawyer a kind of casual confidence, as if even in the middle of a national disaster, the guy still has room for a remark or two. But then there's the other side of it. There are scenes where Sawyer just doesn't feel presidential enough, not because every movie president has to be serious and grave every second, but because White House Down sometimes writes him so casually that the authority disappears. The dialogue doesn't always sound like it belongs to a world leader. His reactions can feel too light, his reasoning too simple. And when the film tries to make him both the symbolic leader of the country and the comic partner in an action set piece, the two versions don't always fit together. That's where the performance becomes divisive. Some viewers see Foxx as one of the best parts of the movie because he keeps things lively. Others see him as completely unconvincing, maybe even the weakest version of a fictional president in this type of blockbuster. And honestly, both reactions make sense, because the character is pulled in two directions. The movie wants Sawyer to represent big political ideas, peace talks, military decisions, national stability, the future of American power, but it also wants him dodging bullets, delivering jokes, and bonding with Cal like they're stuck in the world's most expensive buddy comedy. That's a difficult balance, and the script doesn't always help Foxx find it. When the film leans into the comedy, he works better. When it asks him to carry the weight of the presidency, the role feels thinner. You can enjoy him in individual moments and still feel that the character, as written, lacks the dignity or sharpness the story keeps pretending he has. Still, there's something memorable about how unusual this president is. He's not the stern background figure waiting to be rescued. He's not just a hostage, he gets involved. He becomes part of the escape. He has to learn very quickly that being president doesn't mean much when armed men have turned the White House into a shooting gallery. That makes Sawyer more active than the usual protected political figure in these films. Does it always work? Number. But the movie would be a lot duller without him. Foxx brings warmth, humor, and a bit of unpredictability to a role that could have easily been nothing more than important man in danger. The problem is that White House Down sometimes confuses likable with believable. As a buddy action partner, Sawyer is fun. As the President of the United States during the most insane crisis imaginable, he's much harder to buy. The thing that keeps White House Down from becoming completely mechanical is the pairing of Channing Tatum and Jamie Foxx. That's really the movie's main trick, because without that dynamic, this could have easily been just another loud White House siege movie. Bad guys storm the building, hero runs through hallways, president gets moved from one danger zone to another, government officials yell at screens, repeat until the finale. We've seen that version before, a lot. But once John Cal and President Sawyer are forced together, the movie starts to loosen up. Cal isn't officially supposed to be protecting this man, that's the funny part. He was just rejected for the job, came into the building trying to prove he belonged near the president, got told no, and then, by the most ridiculous timing imaginable, ends up doing the exact job anyway. Sawyer, meanwhile, isn't some distant political symbol anymore, he's suddenly right there beside him, confused, annoyed, frightened, and slowly realizing that this rejected guy might be his best chance of getting out alive. That gives their relationship a nice little action movie spark. Tatum plays Cal like a guy constantly trying to stay calm while everything around him is going insane. Foxx plays Sawyer with this casual, sometimes overly relaxed energy, like even in the middle of a national disaster, he can't fully stop being himself. Together they create a rhythm that's less bodyguard and president and more two mismatched guys stuck in the worst buddy road trip ever, except the road trip is through a burning White House. And when the movie lets them bounce off each other, it's honestly more entertaining. There's something naturally funny about Cal trying to keep the president alive while also getting irritated by him. Sawyer is important, obviously, but he's also another person Cal has to manage. He slows things down, he asks questions, he makes comments, he wants to help, but helping sometimes makes things worse. That push and pull gives the film some personality. At the same time, the dynamic isn't as strong as it could have been. You can feel the movie reaching for that classic buddy action chemistry where the danger is real but the back and forth keeps things alive. Sometimes it gets there. Sometimes the jokes feel too placed, like the script is pausing to remind you these two are funny together. And that's where the pairing becomes uneven, because great banter has to feel accidental. It should sound like two people reacting under pressure, not like two characters waiting for their next punchline. White House Down has moments where Cal and Sawyer feel natural together, especially when the action is moving quickly. But in other scenes, the comedy is a little too obvious, a little too polished, and it weakens the suspense instead of sharpening it. Still, I understand why the movie leans so hard on them. Tatum and Foxx make the film lighter. They give it a different flavor from the more serious version of this same premise. Instead of one grim hero silently taking down enemies, White House Down becomes a two-man escape story. It's not just Cal saving Sawyer, it's Cal and Sawyer learning, very awkwardly, how to survive together. And that's probably when the film is at its most watchable, not when it's pretending the politics are deep, not when it's trying to make every twist feel shocking, not even when it's blowing apart another section of the building. It works best when these two are stuck in a ridiculous situation trying to figure out the next impossible move, somehow turning panic into banter. The movie honestly could have used even more of that, because for all the explosions and betrayals and national crisis material, the simplest pleasure here is watching a rejected Secret Service hopeful and a very unprepared president become an accidental action duo. It's messy, it's uneven, but it gives White House Down its pulse. The villains in White House Down aren't just a random group of masked men kicking down doors for the sake of noise. Well, sometimes they feel like that, but the movie does try to give the attack a bigger political shape. This isn't framed as a simple foreign invasion or some faceless overseas terrorist plot. The threat comes from inside the system, or at least close enough to it, that the whole situation feels more personal and more rotten. That's one of the more interesting choices the film makes. Instead of going with the easiest possible enemy, White House Down builds its conspiracy around domestic anger, personal grudges, political extremism, and people who feel betrayed by the direction the country is taking. President Sawyer wants peace. He wants to pull troops back. He wants to move away from the endless machinery of war. And naturally, in this kind of blockbuster, that means powerful people with money, weapons, and old grudges aren't going to sit quietly and let that happen. So the attack becomes more than just bad guys take over the White House. It becomes this messy collision of paramilitary violence, corrupt insiders, Secret Service betrayal, and the military-industrial complex angle the movie keeps waving around. Some villains have ideological reasons, some seem driven by revenge, some are there for profit, some are just there because the film needs heavily armed men storming hallways every few minutes. Honestly, that mix is both interesting and clumsy. On one hand, domestic villains make the premise feel a little different from Olympus Has Fallen. There's something sharper about danger coming from within, from people who know the system, understand the building, and can exploit trust. It gives the attack a betrayal angle that foreign invasion stories don't always have. On the other hand, the movie doesn't always know what to do with those ideas beyond turning them into action fuel. It hints at serious themes: extremism, government loyalty, profit from war, corruption at high levels, the fear of peace threatening powerful interests, but never really sits with them. Any chance of deeper commentary is quickly pushed aside for another gunfight, another countdown, another chase, another explosion. Then there's James Woods. His character brings that classic, scenery-chewing villain energy. He's not subtle, and the movie doesn't need him to be. He's the kind of antagonist who walks into the story already carrying resentment, menace, and a whole lot of personal bitterness. You can tell the film wants him to feel like the inside man who makes the whole nightmare possible, and Woods gives that role a certain old-school nastiness. Jason Clarke as Stenz brings a more physical threat, a less political speech, more boots-on-the-ground violence. When he's around, the attack feels less like a conspiracy theory and more like a real assault happening room by room. That contrast helps. Woods gives the betrayal its face, Clarke gives the violence its muscle. The problem is that the villains as a group aren't always as threatening as they should be. Their plans are huge, their weapons are serious, their goals are catastrophic, but sometimes they behave like action movie cartoons. The motivations can feel half-baked. The twists are easy to see coming. And the more the movie explains the conspiracy, the less sharp it sometimes feels. Still, I do like that White House Down at least tries to make the villains more layered than a simple invading force. You have extremists, you have insiders, you have old political wounds, you have people using patriotism as an excuse for destruction. You have this idea that the real danger isn't just outside the gates but already standing inside the building with a badge, a title, or a grudge. That's a strong idea. The movie doesn't explore it deeply enough, but it does give the action a slightly different flavor, because in White House Down, the White House isn't only being attacked, it's being betrayed from within. One of the funny things about White House Down is that the supporting cast is almost too good for the movie around them. Look down the list and there are a lot of recognizable faces: Maggie Gyllenhaal, James Woods, Jason Clarke, Richard Jenkins, Joey King, James "Jimmy" Simpson, Lance Reddick, Michael Murphy. These aren't random background players, these are actors who, in the right material, can bring real weight, texture, humor, or menace to a scene. And in White House Down, some of them do get moments. James Woods probably benefits the most. He understands exactly what kind of film he's in. He's not trying to play everything with tiny, restrained realism. He brings that bitter, theatrical villain energy, the kind that works in a big, loud movie where subtlety isn't exactly the house style. Every time he shows up, the film feels a little more alive, mostly because he gives the conspiracy side of the story a clear face. Jason Clarke also stands out, bringing a more direct, physical danger. He's not there to be charming, he's there to make the takeover feel aggressive and immediate. His character gives the attack some muscle, and that helps, because the movie badly needs villains who feel dangerous beyond just carrying bigger guns. Then you have Jimmy Simpson as Skip Tyler, the hacker, who adds a different flavor in a movie full of soldiers, agents, politicians, and action cliché tilde copyright S. He brings a more offbeat presence, not the main attraction, but he gives the film another little pocket of personality, which matters in a story that can easily become just hallways, gunfire, and people shouting into radios. Maggie Gyllenhaal is a little trickier. She's obviously capable of more than the movie gives her. As Carol Finity, she has an important role in the structure of the story. She's the one who rejects Cal. She's tied to the Secret Service world, and she becomes part of the outside response once everything goes wrong. But the character mostly exists to keep the official side of the crisis moving. She gets seriousness, urgency, and responsibility. What she doesn't really get is a lot of room. That's the pattern with several of the supporting actors: Richard Jenkins, Lance Reddick, Michael Murphy, and others help fill out the government response side of the movie. They make the crisis feel bigger than just Callan Sawyer running around inside the White House. You need those control room arguments, those command decisions, those worried officials trying to figure out who's in charge. But most of these characters are more functional than memorable. They're pieces of the machinery. Some deliver exposition, some argue about protocol, some are there so the film can show political panic outside the building. They do their jobs, but the script doesn't always give them enough personality to become more than familiar faces in important-looking rooms. Joey King as Emily is probably the most divisive supporting presence. The film clearly wants her to be more than just the daughter in danger. She's politically aware, observant, brave, and sometimes smarter than the adults around her. That gives her a stronger role in the plot, but it also makes her feel over-designed at times. She has to be the emotional center, the patriotic kid, the hostage, the witness, and the reason Cal keeps pushing forward. That's a lot for one character to carry. Still, she gives the movie personal stakes. Without Emily, Cal's mission would be mostly professional. With her inside the chaos, the whole thing becomes more desperate. So the supporting cast is a mixed bag, not because the actors are weak, but because the film doesn't always know how to use them. Some get to chew the scenery, some get one or two strong moments, some are clearly the because a blockbuster this big needs recognizable people standing around the president, the military, and the Secret Service. But very few of them are developed enough to leave a lasting mark beyond the function they serve. That's kind of the movie in miniature. There's talent everywhere, there's energy everywhere, but the script keeps pushing everyone back toward the same big machine. Get to the next crisis, the next reveal, the next explosion, the next piece of chaos. The cast gives White House Down more credibility than it probably earns on the page. The frustrating part is that you can feel how much sharper the movie might have been if it had let more of these people actually play. For a movie this expensive and this obsessed with spectacle, White House Down has a surprisingly uneven visual texture. There are moments where it looks like the big summer blockbuster it clearly wants to be. The action has scale. The building takes damage, helicopters swing into frame, rooms explode, smoke fills the halls. The movie keeps reminding you that a lot of money was spent putting chaos on screen. But every now and then you get a shot that looks strangely cheap. The helicopter effects are probably the easiest example. Some of them have that overly smooth video game quality where the weight just isn't there. You can tell the movie wants those images to feel massive and dangerous, but instead you become aware of the effects, and once that happens, the illusion starts to crack a little. The same thing happens with some of the green screen work. There are scenes where the actors don't fully feel like they belong inside the environment around them. It's not always terrible, but it's noticeable enough to pull you out of the moment. In an action film that already asks for a ridiculous amount of suspension of disbelief, the visuals really need to help sell the fantasy, not remind you how artificial it is. The sets are another mixed area. On one hand, the idea of recreating the White House as a giant action playground is fun. You get hallways, offices, bunkers, tour areas, ceremonial rooms, hidden spaces, and the lawn itself turned into different stages of the same siege. There's pleasure in watching a familiar political symbol become a maze for an action movie. On the other hand, some of it really does feel like a set, not in the normal movie production sense, but in that very clean, staged, soundstage kind of way. Certain rooms feel less like lived-in government spaces and more like expensive replicas waiting to be destroyed. That doesn't always ruin the film, because honestly the whole movie has a slightly artificial, theme park quality anyway, but it does add to the sense that White House Down is more interested in spectacle than immersion. Then there's the lighting. Most of the time the movie is readable enough, which matters, because action scenes can become a mess very quickly if you can't follow who is where. But there are also darker stretches where the chaos becomes a little too murky. The intention is obvious: make the building feel under attack, unstable, dangerous, full of smoke and panic, but sometimes the darkness doesn't add tension, it just makes the scene harder to track. That's the strange thing about the film's technical side. It's not a small-looking movie. It's not some cheap production pretending to be massive. You can see the resources. You can see the ambition. You can see the attempt to make every few minutes feel like a new piece of blockbuster destruction. But the polish is inconsistent. Some shots have that glossy studio action confidence, others feel rushed or overly digital. Some of the practical-looking destruction works well enough, while some of the computer-generated spectacle lands with a thud. It's especially noticeable because the movie is constantly asking its visuals to carry the excitement. When the story is thin and the logic is shaky, the images need to do a lot of heavy lifting. Sometimes they do, sometimes they absolutely don't. Still, I do think the artificial quality almost becomes part of the movie's personality. White House Down is already a loud, ridiculous, half-comic action fantasy, so when the White House looks a little like a giant movie set, it oddly fits the tone. It makes the whole thing feel less like a grounded siege thriller and more like a blockbuster ride where historical realism was never really the priority. That doesn't excuse the weaker effects, especially with this kind of budget, but it does explain why they're not always fatal to the experience. The film is big, bright, noisy, messy, and obviously manufactured. At its best, that gives it the feel of an older school popcorn spectacle. At its worst, it looks like a very expensive movie that still somehow couldn't make every explosion, helicopter, and digital backdrop feel convincing. And with White House Down, that's pretty much the technical story. Lots of money on screen, not always enough weight behind it. White House Down is one of those movies where your final opinion really depends on the mood you bring into it. Walk in wanting a smart political thriller, and this thing will test your patience almost immediately. The logic is nonsense, the villains are exaggerated, the dialogue swings between cheesy and awkward, the action gets repetitive, and the movie keeps treating absurd situations like they can be fixed by another explosion, another joke, or another last-second escape. But Walk in wanting a loud, ridiculous, easy-to-watch summer blockbuster, and the film is harder to dismiss. There's entertainment here, not elegant entertainment. Not the kind of action filmmaking that feels sharp or dangerous or built with serious tension, but more the kind where you know the movie is stupid, the movie probably knows it's stupid, and for 2 hours everybody just agrees to keep going anyway. That's the strange charm of it. White House Down isn't good in the clean, respectable sense. It's too messy for that, too bloated, too predictable, too dependent on familiar action movie tricks. It borrows heavily from better films, especially Die Hard, and never fully earns that comparison. It also sits next to Olympus Has Fallen in a way that makes its softer, sillier tone stand out even more. But at the same time, it's not completely lifeless. Channing Tatum and Jamie Foxx give the movie enough personality to stay watchable. The action is frequent. The pace, once it gets moving, keeps the film from sinking entirely. James Woods and Jason Clarke bring some villain energy, and Roland Emmerich, for all his excess, understands how to make a blockbuster feel like a blockbuster. He gives you destruction, scale, panic, and that very specific feeling of a movie designed to be watched with snacks, not analyzed with a notebook. Still, the flaws don't disappear just because the movie is fun in places. The biggest issue is that White House Down never becomes thrilling enough to be a great action movie, and it's not funny enough to be a great action comedy. It lands somewhere in the middle, where you can enjoy the ride while also noticing how many parts of it don't really work. The suspense keeps getting undercut. The emotional beats are corny. The daughter subplot is useful but uneven. The twists aren't especially shocking. And by the time the film reaches its final stretch, you can feel the length. It's the kind of movie that gives you exactly what it promises, but not much more. A White House takeover, a rejected hero proving himself, a president pulled into the action, explosions in famous rooms, government officials panicking, a child in danger, villains with grudges, a big final save. If that list sounds entertaining, then yes, you'll probably have a decent time with it. But if that list sounds like every action cliché tilde copyrights thrown into one very expensive blender, you're also not wrong. For me, White House Down works best when you stop expecting it to be clever.